How's everybody doing tonight? How's everybody doing tonight? How's everybody doing tonight? How's everybody's Christmas? I know don't have a whole lot to chat about tonight. I was gonna have a friend from out in North Dakota join us, but he got really sick. He's not feeling too well. And Eli, or my boy, is inside. He was sleeping all day, and he tested positive for COVID tonight. We just did a COVID test on him. He's not doing real good, and pair that with some crappy ice or lack of ice and rain and everything else, and Merry Christmas to us, I guess. I'm sitting in the boat, just kind of probably gonna have to get this thing cleaned up and run this thing if we want to get out. I know it's supposed to get cold here towards the end of this week, but I don't know. Looking at the extended forecast, it doesn't look really good for good ice making weather. It might get down into the 20s at night, but we're talking low 40s during the day. That's not going to be making a whole lot of ice, and we basically have to start over from scratch. I know the rivers are going crazy. The Wolf, some friends of mine were up in New London today doing really well. Had some friends in Fremont. Fish are in the river pretty thick. Guys up in Green Bay are doing really well, up in De Pere, trolling out on the bay. So, there's places to get out. Now it's just a matter of, how brave do you want to be? It's really no different than spring. Just the fact that there's going to be probably a whole lot less people out there. It's just, I've never seen a winter like this. Typically, as we get close to the first of the year, we've got some single digits coming, and that'll make ice pretty quick. All these lakes are ready to go. Water temperature is cold, and it won't take much to get a few inches of ice to get back out there and start walking. But we just don't even have that. The extended 10 days. Like I said, we're in the 40s during the day, and unfortunately, that's not going to do a whole lot. So we'll see. Hopefully things change. I know it's actually gotten a little bit colder than what they said, a few days ago when we were looking at temperatures. So I'm hoping that the weathermen are always wrong when we want it to be nice. Now that they're saying it's going to be nice, I'm hoping they're wrong and we get some cold. So we'll see what happens. But, how was everybody's Christmas? Hope everybody had a good time. And everybody got some new toys and, got a chance to spend some time with friends and family. And it was pretty nice here. We had family over in the boathouse, and then we went over to my parents' house for some Christmas. And yesterday we just relaxed all day. Didn't really do a whole lot of anything. Napped, watched some movies, and just kind of relaxed. So it's nice to do that. And today too is kind of one of those days where you do a little bit of cleaning in the boat and moving some stuff around in the garage now that most of the projects are getting done. I've had tools scattered everywhere for the last 2 to 3 years, working on the boathouse. And now that the inside's done, and every time I go and look for some tools, I got to go through about 14 different boxes to find what I need. So I figured now's a good time to get some of that stuff put away here and reorganized and cleaned up and make some more room and get stuff ready for, spring, summer, and, laying out the shacks. And I guess that's kind of the beauty part of being able to back in the trailer in the heated shop is you don't really have to thaw anything out a whole lot anymore. You're just backing in. If it's super cold and everything's all iced up, just open the doors and turn the heat on and everything pretty much melts. But John, a glass of scotch, talking fishing, almost as good to fishing. Hey, right to you, buddy. Cheers on that one. Let's see. There you go. So I guess I'm looking for input. Do you guys have any topics you guys want to discuss over the next coming weeks? Obviously, once we get into ice, we'll be doing more live reports and kind of what's happening, and get some guys from around the area and out in the Dakotas and Minnesota. I was hoping Randon was going to join us tonight, but like I said, he was going to give us a report from North Dakota, Devil's Lake area. But he came down with the fevers and doing good either. So hoping you're better, buddy, and we'll catch you here in the next week or two. But if people got some want to talk, different things, just comment below and we'll do what we can to either find somebody to join us or we'll tackle it ourselves. That's part of doing this live, is just kind of doing what you guys want to do and talk about what you want to talk about. The system, we did drive around, what day was it, just before Christmas, and I got the drone out and was flying around out on Poygan, and I'm almost glad that I'm hoping that most of the ice on Poygan's gone. We can go check it tomorrow. But that was a mess. A lot of busted up spots out from the South Shore. Was really, I found as much as like 6 inches actually, close to the shoreline, just walking around. But if I walked, 50 to 75 yards out, we were right on the verge of open water. There's big sheets that were kind of floating around, busted up out there and just freshly froze over. So, a good chance that some of that ice is probably still going to be there. All depends really on what's going to happen. So, I know we had some really warm weather. We had a lot of rain, the wind, and my pond in the backyard is wide open now. All the lakes over by Watoma are completely wide open. So it didn't fare well. But like I said, I'd rather start over from scratch with some good, clear, hard ice, because what ice that was out there had a lot of air in it, a lot of seepage, from the rain and warm weather and melting and freezing and melting and freezing. You can only do that so many times with ice, and it just gets to the point where it's not good anymore. So start over, get a fresh start, and hopefully here right after the first of the year, we'll be able to start making some ice and get out on the lakes. Let's see. When I read articles about dead sticks or meat rods, they never talk about what reels they use or the line. They just talk about the rods. Great question, Kurt. So I look as a dead stick basically just another tip up. We're doing the exact same thing as what we do for tip ups. Obviously, if I have a dead stick in my rod holder in a shack, what I do is I'll leave I'll loosen the drag, or if anything, flip the bail and just kind of make maybe one little loop or something like that over the top of the top eyelet, so that it's holding there, but a fish can still take it down. And as far as what I'm using, pretty much the same thing. I'm using a really light braid, because it's obviously on a reel. I'm not going to use 80-pound braid like we use on our tip ups. So I'm using 10-pound smackdown down to a barrel swivel. The only thing I'd probably do a little bit different on my dead stick rods is I have about a 3 to 4 foot lead on rather than that 18 inches for jigging, and just for a little bit more natural presentation, a little bit lighter of a line to work with, and I'm running 4 to 6 pound fluorocarbon, and then a number 20 treble hook with split shot or two, depending on where we're fishing at, or depth or current or anything like that, and that's it. The reels, I don't use anything super special. Spinning reels, obviously, with an inline, you don't have any way to let the line out, other than like maybe a descent reel or something that's got a push in clicker, but like with the free falls and the triggers, you don't have a way to hold the trigger unless you like fully undo the spool. But the one thing with a dead stick is you want to be able to let that fish eat it and take some line. You want to be able to feed it some line. So that's a nice thing. What's up, Mr. Marshall? Merry Christmas, bud. You want to be able to give it some line like a tip up. So that's why having a spinning reel with an open bail works really well. Yeah, the Okuma bait feeders, any of those bait feeder reels. The problem with those bait feeder reels, for the most part, they're always too big. I like to keep a lot of my ice fishing stuff, more ice fishing related, smaller sizes and whatnot. So, but I do know a lot of guys, when we're catfishing and stuff like that in the summertime, a lot of guys use those bait feeder reels. They got a bait clicker on them. Basically, it's like a trolling reel with a clicker, but you can keep the bail closed and put that clicker on, and then as that fish takes out, it just kind of free spools, almost like you're letting planer boards out on a trolling reel. So that's kind of how those work. And like I said, I know a lot of guys use them. I just don't. Typically just a small 500 or 1,000 series spinning reel, and I always just take the line and just wrap it around the eyelet, just once. That way like I say, it's just enough to hold it. And as soon as a fish pulls, it's either one, I'm going to see it pull, but it'll just pull it off the top of the eyelet and, take some line and watch them and click over the bail, set the hook and reel them in. But, as far as rods go, again, if you're going to have some dead sticks sitting out on like boxes or those iFish Pros or, stuff like that with, flag or whatnot, you might want to use something a little bit softer, like a true dead stick rod. But if you're fishing inside a shack and you have it sitting in a rod holder and you're right next to it, and there's a lot of times too where, you'll see those fish hit and they'll hit it pretty hard, and you want to be able to set the hook right away. So you want to have something that's got a little bit of backbone to it that you can stop them, if they take off running. So personal preference, I guess, all depends on on the type that you're doing. But I don't do anything special, anything more than really just a jigging rod, other than just add a little bit extra to the leader. Is there an issue with using a small slip bobber instead of a dead stick? We use a lot of slip bobbers. I almost prefer slip bobber just because of the visual aspect of it for clients and whatnot. They tend to mentally look towards the bobber or look towards the line versus just having a dead stick there with a piece of line there. Some guys don't know what they're looking for. They don't know what they should be watching out for. Everybody knows when a bobber goes down, it's time to set the hook. So, when we're in the shacks, I've always got some slip bobbers for guys, and that's what I prefer. If it's just me, I'm just taking a dead stick rod set next to me and using that. But here's another thing. Rather than carrying rods around and whatnot, but Eskimo and Catch Cover make these rattle reels, and for guys in Wisconsin, not a whole lot of guys have really used the rattle reels, but I've been using them in my hard side shacks for a long time, and those are great options. And now with the whole e-hub system that Eskimo came out with this year, you can attach the hubs, these little plates, right to the side of your shacks. In the hubs, if you're in a hub shack, you can screw them down to some poles or some brackets or the side of your sled, and it's nice to have everything, and then that's spooled up, just like a tip up. And the nice thing with that is, they're small, they're compact, and they run just like a rattler. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to grab one so I can show you guys. All right, I'm back. He's not gone. I just went to go get some stuff here real quick. So the nice thing about these are the Eskimo E-hubs I was talking about. The clips that are on the back, we'll take one off here. You can permanently mount these things to the inside of your shack, either with, you know, just a couple screws, or if you have a hub shack and you're using a hub, this plate will actually attach right to your hub and it stays on there all the time. And then all you got to do is just basically snap this arm will snap on or off. But this is just a plain old like a dead stick rod holder. Grab a rod here. So that's what's nice about, you know, these things. Here's, you can adjust them every which way you want to with these knuckles, move them around and, you know, position them however you want to. But, you know, they've got a nice balance point to it. And, you know, you can watch a rod as a fish bites. So you've got a little bit of play there that'll take a little bit of line. But as I was talking about with the rattle reels, these are same thing. You've got the plates that attach to the rattle reel arm itself. They just click on and off. And this guy here then basically just sits over the top of a hole, and you know, you got your line spooled on it just like you would a tip up. And as soon as that fish starts to pull, it's pretty smooth. There's not really much resistance there at all, and you've got those rattles. So you're not using a bobber, you know, you're hearing it. And obviously, you know, if you get something that comes by and wants to go, you know, that thing's just going to spin on you, and you can set the hook and fish them and, you know, land over or hand over hand them right inside the shack. If you don't have any of these, I know they sold very well at the stores. There's a few guys out there that have some left. But definitely look how easy and compact these things are. Very small. You can keep them on, and it's another rod, you know, really. And you can keep these things, you know, right on your shack. You don't have to carry a bunch of extra rods. You know, grab a couple jig sticks and a few of these, and you put 3 lines out pretty quick. And the nice thing is, too, if it's a nice day, I've even got one of my portables that has a rattle reel on the front side of my sled. And that way there, you know, when you're fishing tip ups and whatnot, the biggest problem, obviously, right, if you're jigging, you got a bunch of holes, is having lines getting all tangled around. Well, if you drill and mount this to the front of your sled and you're sitting inside and fishing, guys, you can hear it. You don't have to worry about, you know, watching for a flag or whatnot. And not only that, but you're going to get that hole, you know, a few feet away from where you're actually jigging. So if you might have one corner of the shack, you can have a rattle reel in front of you. You can be jigging, and then you have another rattle reel in the back. That way there, if you get a school of perch or something that comes through, or white bass, and you know, everything goes off, you don't have to worry about making, you know, that much of a mess. So just a little bit of tip, if you want to get more lines out, you know, Wisconsin, we can obviously fish 3 lines. So it's nice to be able to utilize that and just kind of spread some things out too. So definitely a good system, and you know, it's a lot of fun, especially when you're inside a hard side with a bunch of guys sitting around talking. Nobody's really paying attention, middle of the day, and all of a sudden you hear those rattles go. Everybody's jumping up, and you know, it's a free for all to get to the line and try and get them in. So, but yeah, they've got Eskimo's got the rattle reel, the rod holder. They've got a phone holder. They've got a small little table. And the nice thing is a couple of these things, like the phone holder and the table, are going to work great in the turkey blinds too. So if you have a hub style turkey blind, definitely pick up something like that for spring turkey season, and you know, obviously, and you're fishing. So good question and good topic there. Let's see, what did y'all break, Logan? What? Trying to think of where that came from. I guess you'll have to refresh me as far as what we were talking about as far as breaking. So nobody got anything for Christmas, it looks like. What is everybody's favorite present? What Oh, when you were finding the stuff. So I had to break open one of the boxes and grab a fresh one because all the other ones are already out in the shock. And with it's raining, I just had my socks on, so I didn't run outside. So I just grabbed a new rod holder, a new rattle reel out of one of my boxes. But nothing broke. We're all good there. Just reading through some of the comments. So again, we were talking earlier. We're gonna have to wait for ice, and it's hopefully after the first of the year. That's I'm looking probably that second end of the first week, maybe early second week of January before we can get back out onto some of these bays, unless all of a sudden here in the next few days we get a cold spell that develops and moves in. It's not going to take but just a couple nights. We're going to have walkable ice again because it's ready to go. Bruce asks, what are your favorite lures to use for jigging? Great question, Bruce. It gets brought up, I know, a lot. If you go back and watch, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, we did a whole segment on jigging and different baits and whatnot. But my favorite, obviously, guys that know me, I'm always going to have a number 3 Swedish pimple on, hammered gold, hammered copper. And, the Cast Masters work really good as well. This one just happens to be, that gold. It's got a rattle in it. On dirty water, we're going to be using, bright baits and maybe something with some rattles. But for the most part, most of what I'm going to have on my rod's going to be a Swedish pimple. And if I run into some times, where I know they're feeding on like small bluegills or perch or crappies or something like that, I'll switch over to a Z Viber or, the Z darters or any jigging style, jigging minnow, whether it be the jig and wrap or the Tika. There's a bunch of different styles out there. Any type of those minnow baits. I really don't use a whole lot of those, to be honest with you, for walleyes. When it comes time to bluegills, what are my favorite lures? I've got a couple customs that I've had made up for me over the years, just some different colors. And, for the most part, we're fishing either really gin clear water on these deep glacial lakes, or we're going to be fishing, some shallow bays that's going to have a little bit of a stain to them. But for the most part, the visibility is still pretty good. So I use a lot of, really high contrasting colors. I've got one that's like a watermelon, half green, half pink with some specks on it and a little dropper chain. That one there has been a real good favorite of mine, but I go right back to the, just solid colors, copper, gold, silver, or black. And Elliot 2B rods didn't quite fit in my stocking, but Santa didn't disappoint this year. That's awesome. The basic colors, I'm not one really on getting into all the super high-end custom colored baits and that. I do like the baits that have the little jewels on the tops. Bentley made some, I know, for a while. It started off way back when I was fishing with Nils Master. The Nils baits, they had a I don't remember what it was called, Tapatula or something like that. That had it was a black bait with a red jewel on it, on the front of it. And boy, that was one of my absolute favorite baits. They're hard to find. I still use them, still have a few left. That black and that red always seem to be a really good color for me. And like I said, the coppers, golds, silvers. I primarily am using, a lot of tungsten stuff, but when we get in the shallow areas where you don't want the baits to fall as fast, then we're dropping down to some smaller lead baits still. And even when you get into the really finicky bites, we use just epoxy jigs. It's nothing more than epoxy on a hook with a little bit of paint. They fall really slow. You typically, if you're using monofilament, as we talked about, monofilament will help keep it afloat and almost make it neutral buoyant in the water, whereas the fluorocarbon will make it sink just enough that you can really entice those bluegills, especially when it's on a slow fall bite. Spring walleye on the Wolf jigging canes and jig type. and jig type won't anchored up. Good question, Jeff. Yeah, that's going to come up here pretty soon. And, it really comes down to water temperature. Early on in the season when the water's, still really cold, we're just getting out there, we're using lead head jigs. I like to use a lot of hair jigs just for that extra slow fall, wider profile. And we'll be using some minnows and trying to stay as vertical as possible. That's the most important thing when it comes time to jigging walleyes in the river. Is if you're slipping the current, you want to make sure you're vertical for a few reasons. One, obviously, the distance between point A and point B is always the straightest line. And when you have, a big loop in your line, or you're letting it kind of, slip the current faster than what your boat's going or whatnot, you're going to get some resistance in that line, which will create a big loop. And, if they're just really finicky biting, you're going to miss those bites. So, my favorite setup there in the river again, too, is just, the lightest line you can possibly get. We're using 10-pound smackdown braid, tying direct, no swivels or anything, tying an FG knot or double uni knot or something like that to a fluorocarbon leader. And the nice thing with that is, with that braid, it cuts the current so much more than monofilament or fluorocarbon. You won't get those big loops in the line. So there is a reason, more so than snags and whatnot. It just has less resistance, so you can fish it more vertical. Now, when water temperature starts to warm up a little bit, and you can start getting a little bit more aggressive with your presentations, and we're anchoring up, look up, and I'll post some pictures and stuff. I run a lot of Dubuque rigs, and this is a Mississippi River thing where you're using, a heavy jig on the bottom with a hook. You go up a little ways, put a 3-way swivel or a loop knot, or, whichever way you want, and running another lead behind that with either a fly, small hook, or, whatever you'd like, floating jig. And that's what I sit up and anchor up, especially on the corners, and then you can sit there and you can pump those jigs and work them nice and slow. The Dubuque rigs are awesome for that. Gives you obviously more things for the fish to look at. If you got fish that are swimming tight to the bottom, those heavier jigs will be sitting on the bottom. And then if you got fish that are cruising up a little bit, you're going to get, depending on how high you put your 3-way, you'll get those fish as well. Don't be surprised, guys. You'll catch 2 fish at a time quite often when you're doing that. Kind of same as what we do white bass fishing, but just a little bit more fine tuned with the weights. And then when you get into, later on, and I always tell guys, once the water temperature hits that, 50 degrees, that's kind of that magic number. Get the crawlers out, put the minnows away, and then we start dragging. And that's exactly what we don't want to do when we're trying to vertical jig minnows. We're using, light line, a lot of Carolina rigs, and egg sinkers, 3 to 5 foot leaders, and just a half a crawler, and let that, cast that line out, get onto some of these straightaways. Just hold your rod tip up in the air and let those egg sinkers just walk the bottom, dragging a half a crawler behind you. And the nice thing about that is on that system, you very seldom get snagged up. And if you do, a number 4 or number 6 Aberdeen hook really bends easy, and you'll just straighten it out enough to pull the line out. So you're not changing baits or losing jigs a whole lot. And again, 50 degrees, switch to crawlers, get the Carolina rigs out, or just, we just call it, dragging crawlers. And if you're in good sand, sandbars where you don't have a whole lot of brush and whatnot to get caught up in, using a 16th ounce, depending on the current, I try and use at least a 16th ounce or less. You don't want weight. You want that thing to just ride the current and ride along the bottom for those fish to come and pick them up. Good question. I love the dragon. For me, I think that's some of the funnest fishing there is in the river. The vertical jigging and whatnot is fun, but that dragging is a lot of fun. And then once everything is kind of really getting going, these fish are starting to come back. That's when we'll start throwing crankbaits up into the trees. We'll start using maybe some more blade baits, or bigger profile, rip and wrap style baits, and fishing inside those deeper holes just to attract some of those fish. Guys that fish on the rafts, they've got great systems. They'll run 20, 30 lines off of a raft with floating rapalas stacked throughout the whole entire water column. And when these fish get done spawning, they're just riding the current back, and anything that's gets in their face, they're just going to eat. So there's a plenty different techniques, and as we get closer towards spring, we'll definitely pull out all the gear and show you more. But it's a good starting point anyway. Mike says surface temp was 38 to 40 in New London. Mike did good today. How many did you end up with, Mike? Let's see. As far as cadence, Jeff, when we're vertical jigging, I like to do like a second and a half hold. You try and stay as vertical as you can. I'll lift it up maybe 6 to 8 inches, hold it for a second, and then drop it back down. Lift it up, hold it, and drop it back down. And my line is always tight. I'm not sitting there, just kind of snapping it or jigging it. I raise it up, and as we're slipping the current, you raise it up and you drop it back down. Raise it up and drop it back down, keeping that line tight all the time. And that way, there is that minnow's kind of just doing this. And I'll watch it a lot of times on my graph. All of a sudden you'll get into those current humps or those current seams where it's up and down, up and down, up and down. And those fish will be laying right on the bottom side of those. And you'll be jigging. And all of a sudden you'll just kind of feel your bait go down towards the bottom. And as soon as you get in those holes, or as soon as you get in the hole and you start to bring it back up, that's typically when you get hit. And if you're not keeping your line tight and not being able to feel, exactly what you're seeing on your graph, you're going to miss a lot of those fish, because most of the time, that current's coming across those humps, comes across and then creates an eddy on the backside of those humps. And those fish just sit there, and they wait for food to come down and circle right back into their mouth. So as you're jigging, if you're not paying attention to where that bottom is and you miss those holes, you're just not putting the bait in front of the fish's mouth, and they're not going to see it as much as what you would, keeping everything right where it needs to be. Catch a lot of sturgeon on it. Oh yeah, absolutely. But you catch a lot of sturgeon if you're anchored up in the river, walleye fishing in the springtime. You're naturally just gonna hook into sturgeon. I don't care what you do. If you fish the Wolf River, you're gonna get hooked up. Speaking of that, I guess kind of a touchy subject. What do you think's going to happen with sturgeon spearing this year? I know it's not looking good, and I'm hoping, in my favor, the one year that I finally draw a Poigan tag, we're headed to Puerto Rico the weekend before opener, and we're going to be coming back that Sunday night of opening weekend. So I'm not even going to be able to get out there and use it. Hopefully, if the season goes, I've got plenty of friends out there that'll have shacks set up, and I can get there and the season goes through Monday yet, and I can at least go sit for Monday morning and get a chance at one. But cross my fingers. I called them and told them, I said, hey, I know you guys drew and you drew later and didn't know what was happening. And we booked a trip, and now I get pulled, and I just wanted to not take it this year and transfer it over to next year, but they won't let me do it. So anyway, that's that. But what do you think? I mean, do you think they'll have it? I know there's so much time left yet till spearing, but really there isn't, guys. We've only got maybe 4 weeks, and 4 or 5, 5 weeks really. But a lot can happen in 5 weeks, just with the trend. And now, with the sun starting to get higher in the day and the days are going to get longer, it's going to take a lot more to build ice than what it would have if we would have already had ice. It's one thing to go into the season with a little bit of ice, but if we're not making it all day long, or if we're losing time to make it, we just don't build it like what we should. 13 total, lots of shorts, kept our 6 feet, 14 fish. Yeah, that's awesome. Great eaters. Good job on that. So yeah, it's a crazy year for everybody. I looked at some reports from some buddies up in northern Minnesota, looking at some guys that are out in the Dakotas. Iowa obviously doesn't have much for ice, if any, left. Guys in northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin, some of the back bays and that guys had 4 or 5 inches. That's all wide open. Yeah, Jared has a good point. Is this going to be the last year of spearing in general? It's kind of a bunch of crap there with if nobody's ever seen it yet, what they're trying to do is they're actually trying to put the sturgeon on the endangered species list, which would therefore close all of our seasons throughout the entire system. No more spearing, no more catch and release or whatever they have on the Wisconsin and the St. Croix and the Miss. It'll be closed to fishing for good. So I'd hate to see that, because that is such a huge economic impact for the Winnebago system. It's crazy. A lot of people depend on that, like we depend on ice and everything else. People come from all over the world to do this, and if they take that away, that's going to be a huge hit. I guess the one thing is there'll be a lot of ice shanties for sale. And no big holes to drive around and fall into, but that's part of what we are. That's part of who we are. It's Winnebago, man. It's sturgeon spearing, and without that, that's a huge loss. Economically, and not only that, but man, we need to pull some of these fish out of the system, just because of how many there are. I couldn't imagine that many more fish every single spring, year after year building. Man, we'd be that or out on the lake trolling or whatnot. You'd be losing gear and boards, and totally in favor of keeping the spearing season going. Yeah, those sturgeon they can go away. Domingo's up in the UP, Gwin, Escanaba area. Checked 3 lakes today, all unsafe. One lake had about 1 inch until about 30 feet out, then less. Domingo, yeah, man. Thanks for the report. Thanks for tuning in. Please, guys, if anybody, don't matter where you're at, chime in here. We're not looking for spots. Just give, general areas as far as where you're located, what kind of ice you got. Around here, central Wisconsin, it's gone. We don't have anything left. We got to start back over. A couple little sheets, that stuff that's basically frozen slush or just slush kind of, sitting around or whatnot. But I'm assuming here in the next day or two, whatever little bit of wind we get, that'll all be gone. Let's see. Let's see any more questions from you guys. Yeah, I think I got everybody's questions. So yeah, really, that's all I know. Really just gonna wait now and waiting game for ice, and maybe try and get the boat out and chase some walleyes on the Fox or the Wolf, and just wait. It's going to give me some time to get the boathouse cleaned up and some reorganization. And if anybody's got some time, wants to come out, I got a little bit of steel I got to hang up. If anybody's done any siding work, let me know. That'd be awesome to get that done. But that's kind of the stuff I'm looking at doing, just a few projects around the house until we get to ice. And yeah, what about Battle and Bago? Tom, it's my guess is if we get to middle of January here and we don't have drivable ice, it's going to be really hard for them to do that again. I don't know what to say there. Maybe we'll do a river deal and have fishing out in the river. Noodle versus spring bobber if you have time. Hey, yeah, Domingo, no problem. I'm not a spring bobber guy when it comes time to deeper water rods, just because I think you lose so much on finicky fish. By the time you set the hook, you got to lose that much play in a spring bobber before you can even get a penetration. So I straight line everything. Go to just softer rod tips, or depending on what you're after. Definitely just a softer or more sensitive rod, and watching the line and watching and feeling the rod tip is pretty much what I do. Now, that being said, when I'm fishing my long rods in 7 feet of water or less, we're running 5 foot long rods, or telescoping, or just straight inline rods, and the line goes through the blank, out the tip, and through a spring bobber. Those we use, we'll use the spring bobbers there. And typically it seems like when you're in that shallow water, the fish tend to be a little bit more finicky than what you get out in that deeper water. Typically when I find bluegills out over deeper water, crappies, whatnot, crappies, obviously you get that lift bite. So you can say your bobber going down or your line going down, you watch your line, also your line will just kind of go slack. And that's because they come up, and they always, a lot of times they hit from the bottom up. But the bluegills, when you get out into that deeper water, 9 times out of 10, you're going to feel it. I mean, they hit pretty hard when they're out suspended. It's when you're in shallow in those weeds that they tend to be a little bit more finicky and just kind of cruising around. You really have to entice them to bite, and checking that spring bobber, and you got to find the right material too. I know a lot of guys, I look at their spring bobbers and they're so stiff that they're just missing the bite. They're not seeing anything. Sure, if you get one that comes in and just holds on to it for 2 seconds and try and swims away, they'll finally see it go down. But for the most part, when I'm fishing some finicky bluegills, I'll see that spring move just a tiny little bit and just sit there. That's you got to be able to use that and see that. And we've got some fiber optic tape that we've used. There's some different type of titanium wire. People use a lot of that nitrite wire or whatever that you use for braces, in different lengths. And a lot of my spring bobbers, what I have is it's held on with a couple of bands, so I can lengthen it or shorten it depending on how sensitive you want to make it. The other thing is you don't want to have it so sensitive that when it's windy, that thing's moving your line and all that all around too. So it's kind of a happy medium there. Do you use live scope or anything like that, Kurt? Absolutely. 360 is, if I would have to take a chance or take one thing out other than my flasher, you can see my wall flashers behind me. All Markham M5s and some M3s, and even some M1s and the MX7s. All all that stuff works great. But when I'm chasing and looking, I'm going to have my 360. And after that, then I'll use, the live scope. But how I go about looking for fish and how I go about, fishing is, if we're in a super big area, new area, and I just want to find some schools of fish, I'm going to drop the 360 down first. I can cover a really big area of water, with drilling one hole, and see about 300 feet around me with one hole. That's where I start. If I'm out fishing some basin crappies or panfish and a lot of fish are suspending, that 360 is great because it's going to show you where the fish are, and it's going to show you, yep, this general direction, that's where you want to go. But when you get there, dropping down a live scope or, the Mega Live on the birds, and rotating around and seeing exactly, how tight the fish are schooled up, what depth they're at, and kind of watching their reaction. Are they really chasing fish around? What we find a lot of times out on these lakes by us is deep, clear lakes. I'll find the fish with some 360, drop the Mega Live down, and if the fish are biting, I drop a jig down, and I could be 15 feet away, it doesn't matter, clear water. As I'm dropping a jig down over 30, 40 feet, if those schools of bluegills or crappies are feeding, they're swimming up at 100 miles an hour and grabbing those baits. So once I know that, then all I typically do is I'll grid out, an area out over the basin, take my flasher, and then I just hole hop. I'll keep the live scope around, or the 360 is always on my sled. I just drop that and kind of watch the screen from behind my snowmobile and kind of see which way the schools are moving, and then you can just chase them down. So it's all about running and gunning. You're not going to do that with a Mega Live or a Live Scope. They're just too big and too heavy, and you're constantly having to adjust and move things around. I don't enjoy it. Doesn't say it doesn't work and doesn't help guys, but when I got a school of fish and I got them pinned down, I'm a lot quicker and a lot more efficient with my flasher and watching the 360 off from a distance and just keep walking around and chasing them down. So that's kind of my whole take on what we're doing. Using live baits, how and what do you use for like jigs, Rapala, and jigging spoons? Yeah, Bruce, we just kind of talked about that earlier on. Let's see, with your 360 out to 300 feet, do you have a hard time seeing schools of panfish versus saying if your range was down, say like 50 feet? Well, Adam, that's a good question. It all depends on what depth of water you're at. We have a lot of lakes that are 40 to 60 feet deep over by me, central Wisconsin, really deep, clear bodies of water. And at 300 feet, even though I can't see, typically when I'm out over those basins, you're not going to see 1, 2, 3, 4. You're not going to see just little specks, little school, groups of 5 or more. Typically, when you get out over these basins, you're going to see schools of hundreds of bluegills or crappies swimming around. And at that point, it looks like little bait clouds. And that's where I can get close or no. And if they're in super close to me, if they're not out at the end of the range and they're in pretty tight to the, to my hole, absolutely, you're going to see the specks and whatnot. And if you want to really kind of, just check out areas where you're fishing, around cribs or structure, then I typically drop my range down to like 60, 70 feet and get a little bit better view of what's happening. But at 300 feet in that deep water, it looks like schools of bait fish, and at least can get me in the right direction to start drilling and going towards. Back to using live baits. And so Bruce, if I'm using a live bait, it's going to be on a number 20 treble hook on either my box tip ups or on a rattle reel or a dead stick in the shack, which isn't very often unless I know we're going to be sitting tight someplace. At that point, we're pretty much jigging all the time. And what my favorite is going to be, any type of spoon, like a Swedish pimple, a Castmaster, slender spoons, typically in that number 3 size, or, the 5/16 or 1/8 ounce, depending on what spoon you're using. And no live bait. And, I will bring out some plastics every once in a while and put some on just for a little bit of action, or maybe some, a little bit of scent if some of the plastics are scented. But most of the time, I'm jigging that bait, just naturally learn how to use it. We talked about it last week. Go inside a swimming pool, take the hooks off, so you don't hook anybody. Or, if you got some place that you can go and jig and work these baits, see what they do when you snap them. That's learning what a bait does is just going to make you that much better of a fisherman, because when you get a school of walleyes that comes in, or you get a walleye that comes in, if you don't know what your bait's doing, you can't mentally, put together 2 and 2 as far as what that walleye is doing with your bait. And a lot of times, if you're, let's just say you're pike fishing or muskie fishing and you do a figure 8, you're watching that bait. Every time that bait goes around, you're watching that bait to see what that bait's doing, trying to keep it in front of that fish's face. When you're jigging, ice fishing, if you don't know what that bait's doing, you could be jigging and not realizing that, man, every time that fish comes up and takes a swipe, you're actually pulling it away, or you're doing something that just isn't going to work to make it easier to catch a fish, I guess. So I tell guys, watch and watch and watch. Learn how these baits move. Just little quick snaps versus really big rips. Sometimes you want a spoon falls down. I know I can feel it in my line, or I can see it in my line, and I can tell you, all right, is this bait just doing a straight free fall or is it fluttering? And that's all stuff you're going to learn just by how it feels and how you can, pay attention to what your line is doing. And it's going to make you such a better fisherman. And not only in the wintertime, but as you're, fishing different baits, when you do this and you watch baits, and just study them and concentrate and figure out what you're doing, you're going to understand what your baits are doing a little bit better in the summertime too. Can you explain how you hook a fathead with a size 20 hook? Do you go through it all the way the back on the very thinnest part, or just stick it into the back and not push the hook all the way through it? Oh, great question, Casey. So what I typically do is on a fathead, a rosy red, a shiner, anything, I'm hooking it typically right behind the skull. I will go through extremely thin. I try and tell people this, and I will always go back. And it's not that I don't trust them, but I don't trust them. And Jared, I know, might chime in on this too, because I get on him every once in a while too, as far as hooking them too deep. Fatheads, shiners, their vertebrae. The closer you get to your head, the more nerve endings there are. And if you stick one of those, you're going to kill the minnow. And obviously a dead minnow is, not what you want. So you really, all you're doing is piercing just that top layer of skin right behind the head. There's Jared. And you don't want it really even into the meat. I mean, if you do, it's so lightly. And I always, even myself, I mean, I do it enough. It's pretty natural to me how I hook it. And we'll do a video of this because it's a good question with these hooks being how small they are. What I typically do is I will actually stick one of the hooks into my finger and then just pull the line tight, hold it there. And then you can, fish or put the hook into the minnow. It having a little bit of steadiness, when it's kind of in your finger and pulling back, allows you to be really precise on how you hook that number 20. That's such a critical part to that whole system. And I always and the customers are horrible at it. And you can show them 100 times, and the one time you don't go and check, it's the time that the minnows are dead. And then the other thing too is, once I get on them a few times, they'll try hooking it really thin. Well, then they don't even hook it. They think the hook is in there, but they might go through the fin or something like that, and it's then the minnow just swims off. But getting that hook set just right keeps the minnow alive, super active. And always, like I was telling you, I even do it myself. I hook the minnow on, I'll drop it in the water, I'll watch it just for a couple seconds before I send it down the rest of the way. Because if you spine them, you'll notice right away, because all they're going to do is they're going to do they just kind of do a little bit of a shimmy. And at that point, if that minnow is doing that, you spine them. It's going to be dead in about 2 seconds. Pull it out, hook a new one on, send it down. When you send a minnow down, that thing should be shooting off and darting all over the place. You don't want them sitting there just doing little tail flips, because at that point you've killed them. So just always be sure of that. Always make sure of that your minnow's hooked good, and you'll be good to go there. Every once in a while, and maybe more crappie fishing, I will tend to hook the minnow in the tail. And here's why: is when you hook them in the head, they can swim and they'll kind of do this, and just kind of always free float back down. When you hook them in the tail, and what you got to understand how crappies feed. Crappies love going up after bait. When you hook them in the tail, they tend to swim straight up, and then they'll come back down and do this. And when you get that, it's just more of a natural thing for those crappies to really go after. I've tried it in perch, and you miss so many perch by doing that, because they come in, and a perch and a walleye 98% of the time are going to grab by the head first. Do you ever hook them behind the dorsal fin? Nope, Shannon. Bigger baits I will. But even at that, if I'm pike fishing, any of my tip ups, any big game fish, whether it be walleye, pike, or whatnot, they are going to get hooked right behind the head. For the reason I just said is that 98% of the time, those fish, they're going to come in and they're going to eat it head first. Whether they eat it head first right then and there, or if they T-bone it, they always turn the bait around and swallow it head first. So that's why I think you get much better hookup, is because when these fish come and if they T-bone it and they feel that hook or that line, they'll just spit it back out. You don't really see a whole lot of them come up from behind and eat, tail first, because when they do that, they have to, turn it around in their mouth and to get it to digest. That's why, Mother Nature protects her own, right? That's why when the fins on a bluegill, they go down, you lay them down. If you tried to pull them backwards, those spines are going to get hooked in the game fish, throat and kill them. That's why everything gets turned around and swallowed head first, because that's the way the gills and the fins and everything else lay down in order to get down into the fish's stomach. So just something to think about there. Yeah, Jeff, you'll love those number 20s. You're gonna catch so many more fish, and your hookup percentage, just everything about using them, you'll really like it. So I think I answered everybody's questions there. Boy, really it. I'm just kind of discouraged about the whole weather thing. It's pretty depressing for a lot of people in the ice fishing world. That is for certain. Do me a favor, guys. Once we get back into ice too, please go and support. If you got any last minute Christmas shopping or gifts that you have to buy, take a look at your local guys first before you start going to the big box stores. If there's a price thing or something like that, most of these guys will match, anything that the big box stores are doing. You're keeping your money local and you're keeping these guys going. And, I really feel for them. The guides here and the bait shops and the ski resorts and the bars and, all these people that depend on winter to make some money and make their living are struggling big time right now. And I know, everybody says, well, it's happened before. Yeah, it has happened before. But we've also got forecasts that, we might have, warm December or something like that. But by the end of the September, this time of the year, it had already gotten cold. And by the first of the year, we're already getting back out there. We don't have a 10-day forecast that supports anything but, getting, maybe an inch or two of ice out there. So it's sad. It really is sad, and it's depressing for a lot of people. So Shannon, yeah, man, good luck. I can check in with my guys up there and I'll send you a message. I got some guide friends that are up there. I'll check with them and see, give me a good, honest report. So many of these resorts and that I think are going to, start panicking and tell you to come up, and, you might be able to walk out into the front yard and put out some tip ups and still have to pay them. I don't know. I'm just speculating. I hope they don't do that, but I know a lot of guides and that I know up northern Wisconsin stopped now after all this rain, and just gonna have to wait till we get some ice. The shorelines are gone. If you can get out to the ice that's out there, a lot of just 1.5 to 3 inches. So it's not good. And I'm not saying it's everywhere. There's probably some spots that are maybe have a couple inches on it, but the safeness and the quality of that ice after all this rain ain't going to be good. Nothing that I would want to go start checking until I've got a few days of sub-zero or really close to 0-degree weather. That's what we're looking for. John asked if we use grubs or spikes. I use a lot of maggots. I like the color change of, I use a lot of red and white maggots. I do use waxworms, and when I'm hooking on the waxworms, I'm typically double hooking them, and these are great points. I'll do some just some short reels for you guys to kind of show you exactly how I hook my baits, especially bluegill fishing and whatnot. But yeah, spikes, waxworms, use them both. I don't use a whole lot of plastics. There are sometimes, when I get into some of these lakes that have a good hellgrammite foundation, or I know there's a lot of big bugs swimming around. That's when I'll typically pull out some of those hellgrammite style bugs or plastics. And actually, Jared's uncle makes a lot of nice plastics up here in the Squirrel that guys do really well on. And they have, they're just the typical wedgie style plastics that everybody uses. But I've got a few, Euro tackle. That bloodworm works really well. When you're fishing perch or even walleyes over on our system, represents exactly what they're feeding on, and it looks super natural. And then a couple of their fries that the bluegills just destroy, and the crappies and whatnot too. And then Z-Man's got a couple that I used them all summer, so I'm excited to try them out this winter and see what happens. But they got a couple new ones that I think are going to do really well in the areas that have all the big the dragonflies, dragonflies and thunderbugs and bugs like that. They got that motor oil color, that green pumpkin, that is just phenomenal. And we whacked them all summer long on those things, so it'll be nice to see what happens here in the winter. Squishing the innards out of a waxworm help for finicky bluegills. Bait flutters a lot nicer. Every single time I hook a waxworm, it gets squished, and that's where I'll show you on the reels. We'll make a video on exactly how. And not only that, but on spikes too. If you get into an area where the bluegills are, they're getting really finicky, if you just take one red spike and work all the juices and all the innards out of there and have that thing lightly hooked, there's just a perfect flutter to that, that the bluegills, it drives them crazy. And you can fish, really light, light jigs and sight fish with those, and works really good. Really kind of triggers those finicky fish. So definitely, multiple ways to fish them. We, load them up, put 8, 10 on a hook, maybe 1 or 2. But that's why I like, using that red and white, is that contrasting colors, when you're jigging, creating that flash, that flutter, and really helps when, when you're out there, trying to entice the fish to come in. Yeah, no safe ice, get the boat ready again. Hey, that's where I'm at right now. I have a feeling that's going to be the plan, is to be back out in the boat here, and lots of walleyes being caught right now. I'm just going to check here a couple. All right, no more comments on my Snapchat, guys. So it's streaming on like 4 different platforms here. The only one that doesn't show up on my main screen is Instagram. So I just went and checked to make sure there are no other comments or questions for the Instagram guys. All right. Well, if nobody else has anything to add, or you're looking for reports, I know Kurt's Island up in Minocqua gave one earlier today and basically said they got to wait for some cold weather now. Everything there is back to square one. Eagle River area, kind of that same deal. The only guys I know that are still getting out, I seen some guys up in northern Manitoba that were driving vehicles around, pulling big wheelhouses. I'm sure the guys up on Lake of the Woods are being extremely cautious. I haven't talked to anybody up there today. I was going to check in, but I figured if they were moving shacks around, they were going to have a busy day today. I do know like Leech Lake and a lot of the lakes up in that northern part had opened back up, and just in the same boat, just waiting for cold again. Yeah, no snow. They even stopped making snow at the ski resorts over here in Wisconsin. it it's such it's a disaster. This week here should be one of the busiest weeks. I know for me it's a huge bonus. I haven't counted on fishing between Christmas and New Year's in quite a few years, just because the temperature changes. Last year was one of the first years in a long time we were actually able to get out on the ice, and we had a lot of guys booked for this week, but unfortunately just isn't happening. It's just not nothing that we want to make a norm. I'm okay. Last year, kind of a reset year, thinking, all right, we'll go into it this year and have a really good season. And now we're getting dealt, pretty nasty blow again. We can't have it 3 years in a row. I'm hoping not. We're going to pray. And who knows, maybe January comes around here and we see some just stupid cold weather come in and stick around for the rest of the winter. And I'd be all right if we have ice, through April. Give us a good 3 to 4 months of ice fishing. I'd be very okay with that. I know a lot of you guys probably would much rather get the boat out, but I'm okay with getting in a good winter and getting guys out on the ice. I get a lot of people. Sure, we get the locals and people and the repeat customers that come up to go out and fish, but believe it or not, I get a lot of people from Mexico and all over the world actually that want to go out and experience what ice fishing is, and those are the people I feel for, because they've got plane tickets booked, they've got everything booked already, basically from 6, 8, 10 months ago, and they're coming in to go ice fishing, and if we don't have any ice, I can't take them. Get an inner tube, I guess, and put some tip ups out and put them on an inner tube or do something like that, and that would be the only thing we could really do at this point. But that's not the experience that these people come to do, and I much prefer getting out on the ice and setting the grill up and cooking some food, and really looking forward to it. If that's all you guys got, I think I'm gonna leave you. I'm gonna go kind of relax with the wife and turn on the boob tube and watch some movies, and that's gonna kind of be the night here. Like I say, Eli's really sick with got COVID, and kind of wrecked what we're gonna do here the rest of the week. So say some prayers for him, and hopefully he can get back to feeling normal here and kick that stupid bug. I appreciate you guys tuning in again, and Merry Christmas to everybody. Hopefully everybody had a good Christmas, and we'll be back next week, where I think we'll have some guests next week. Hopefully we can get some guys from Minnesota, and I will do my darndest here to touch base with everybody I know in the ice world that has ice, and post locations and whatnot, so you guys, if you want to get out here over the holiday week, that you can go for a drive and get you some honest reports. So I appreciate it, guys, and we'll catch you guys later. Have a good evening and Merry Christmas again. See ya.